Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, like basically it's already started. So like I don't want to give any formal like introduction about you.
Okay.
Because we are going to talk about a varied topics, but I just want to give people a little bit idea that you are a professor at Rutgers, and but you can talk about like yourself, like what exactly are your interests, and like how long you have been into Rutgers, and what do you teach, and in what topics you have like interest in. So
sure. Okay, sure. So you want me to start that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I started here as a professor about 7 years ago. Started as an adjunct, and so that just means, that's a fancy word for saying you teach part-time. You know, it's you gotta love the academics. You know, they're good at the puffery.
Right.
So in any event, and I did that. I enjoyed it, and I've always had a bend for education. Now, I've donated a lot of time to the CFA Institute. So I've probably graded exams something like 15 or 20 times, 20 different years.
For CFA?
For the CFA. So level 1, level 2, and level 3. When I took level 1, by the way, the first half was multiple choice. The second half was short answer and essay. And then that slowly crept into all multiple guess, and then it was like level 2 was eventually became half multiple choice, and then short answer, and then it became all, because so many people, the growth was so fantastic that the number of people you needed to grade was huge. Like so, the very first year I graded, there was me and 3 other people who would grade one question. And that's the way it is. You get a team, you grade that one question. The idea is to be consistent. Every paper gets graded precisely the same way.
Oh.
And somebody grades it and somebody regrades it after you as well later on. So that everybody that deserves to pass will pass. Everybody that deserves to fail will fail. It's like they work ridiculously hard to that. But anyway, my team was me and 3 other people. We did it in the library down at University of Virginia. And then in the heaviest question I had to do was one about it was a blue book question, and it's like a portfolio management question. And that team was probably 100 or 150 people. It's a huge number of people, because normally you would grade 100 to 200 exams a day. Maybe let's call it 200, like for a normal question. This you were like, you got 20 done. You were like a superhero if you did 40 in one day, because the question is so long and so hard. He did that. Then I set the passing score a bunch of years, because you work with teams of people to do that. I really enjoyed that. It's very interesting.
So you set the score for like the whole world, basically.
Yeah, with some other people. Some other people. So the way that I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to talk about that process, but it was a very interesting process, and they really wanted to figure out if you are the just qualified candidate, a person who should just pass that test, how many points should you get on each question, and therefore the whole test and stuff. And that was where the line was set. And then that's a lot of where the extra grading would come. So anybody that's close to that would get regraded to make sure it was right, that nobody got cheated. So they were super, super good about that. And then way later, I went and became part of the curriculum committee. And so I worked with people to establish the curriculum for the exams and for continuing education. And stuff like that. And so that was very interesting. And so I learned a ton about education, how to do exams, how to think about qualifications, how to be fair, and stuff like that, about the process and how to really get at what you want. So it's very valuable. And I've always had that. And I really enjoyed that for 2 reasons. One is I enjoyed the work, but I would meet a lot of people from all over the world. In fact, for a brief period of time, I was part of the Indian diaspora. That there was always a huge group of guys from India that would come in, and we would always have a dedicated dinner or two, or we would go for Indian food in Charlottesville. There's a couple of good ones down there, and I was an honorary member of that group, and it's a really bunch of fun people that we had. So that was the great part, is you met so many good people, really smart people, but people had interesting jobs, different interesting backgrounds. So many people from Asia, China.
This is at like what time when you were professor here
No, this is all this. Everything I did at CFA Institute was before I was a professor here. Yeah, so it was right when I started in the investment management business. I went to work at Peru, and the guy that was part of the team that hired me says, "You know all this material. You got to go get a CFA." I'm like, "What's a CFA?" It's like, I had no idea what it was. Never heard of it. I'm like, I have no interest in taking another test.
Yeah.
I've been through graduate school. I'm dying here. He goes, "You know all this material. You have to go take the test." And I go like, "Oh, okay." And then it was kind of a thing at Peru. There was about 20, 25 of us that would take the test, and somebody would get the Stala notes. The guy named Stala would create like the Cliff Notes for doing all this. They had a big library at Peru, so I could go get all the books. There was like 15 books back in the day, and I could study. And so I passed it 1, 2, 3, and he was right. I mean, I knew most of the material from going through school and graduate programs and stuff like that. And then I was working in fixed income, and that's a huge advantage because fixed income is very complicated. A lot of embedded options in the products, and so portfolio theory around that, and duration and convexity and interest rate risk and credit risk, and that all is a lot of overlap there with equities. But that was such a mathematically complex product that since that's what I was doing every day, that was like I didn't have to study for that.
Yeah.
Which was like 20% of the test, was a lot of the test. And so I could focus on the other things. And so
then how do you decide to like come into this being an educator and being a professor?
Like I said, I like to learn, and I'm kind of really a nerd about studying. I studied. In fact, we were just giving the class there, and I was telling the kids, be sure to have some fun while you're here at school. So I studied too much. My typical day as an engineering student was I was up at 8, and I was in classes from 8 to 12. Come back, have lunch, go to a lab in the afternoon, get back at 5, have some dinner, go to the library from 6 to 12, and then come back, drink beer from 12 to 2, and pass out, and then get up at 7 o'clock so I could be in class at 8 o'clock the next day. And I remember getting back home in my freshman year, at the end of the freshman year, at winter break, and I slept for 3 days. My mom thought I died, so I got home. I was so tired. I just went into my room, slept for 3 days, came out, didn't eat, didn't drink. Maybe I had a glass of water. I don't know. I don't remember. But I didn't eat. For 3 days, all I did was sleep, and I came out of the coma. And did it. So my first real taste of it was as a freshman or a sophomore. I don't remember, but I taught physics, freshman physics. I think as a sophomore. So I got an A in that class in physics, and then they had this program where it was sort of a tutor style of education. So I was responsible for like a dozen kids. And I'd usher them through the whole the process, and at the end of each week they would take a test, and after the end of the semester they would have to take like a final. I don't remember if they had a midterm, but they had a final, and they would get a grade. So that was my first taste of that, which I thought was very interesting, and something I wanted to try, and I enjoyed, but didn't get back to that until CFA days. I was a TA when I was a doctoral student, and I worked for Professor Jay Ritter, who you don't know, but he did tons of work on IPOs, and he still publishes on that particular subject.
IPO, you mean initial public offering?
Initial public offerings, yeah. So if you want to know anything there is to know about IPOs around the world and the characteristics and how they do it and the issues and stuff, he's the guy who's been tracking that forever. He was also a very fun guy to work for as well because he liked to trade futures. So he would stop and he's like, he was like,
so like, how you have been teaching for like how many years now?
I think here at Rutgers it's about 7 years now.
Like as a teacher, as a educator.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you taught like in your sophomore year and now you're teaching, like how, because you were talking about philosophy of education. So I want to know your philosophy and how it's evolved over the time till now from that sophomore guy.
So I was kind of started this whole process and kind of thought about education the way I went through it. I would study, go to class, take tests, and get a grade. And that's where the way I approach it now, and that's the way the school kind of basically approaches things now. And I've given things a lot of thought. I followed a little bit of this group that I think it's called Synthesis, which is associated with Elon Musk. And he wanted a place for his SpaceX parents to send their kids to school. I think that was the genesis of it. But they're talking a lot about problem solving as opposed to memorization. And so what I do with my classes, and I know I frustrate the kids like crazy, and that's why they like to, not really compliment me online, if I can say it that way. Sometimes my wife says, "Do you really want to cheat?" And I go like, "Yeah, why?" It's just like, "Do you see what they say about you online?" And I said, "Yeah, I know, but they don't really mean it. They're frustrated. It's like stuff like that." But and so when you guys go through high school, and students go through high school, it's very much of recall. You learn something, you spit it back on a little test, and whether it's the times tables when you're a teen, when you're a little kid, to
it's like
history,
rote memorization.
It's rote memorization. So I'm being an engineer by training and by heart. I want people to be able to solve questions, solve problems. The challenge for people who are coming through education right now, school now, is they're coming into a world where simple things you're just going to ask ChatGPT. And even before that, my philosophy was, you can do a proper Google search. You can almost find answers to anything. Yeah. So in terms of data and things like that. But to solve a problem that hasn't been solved, you got to be able to use your noodle. And that's a much harder thing. And so I'd try to give tests where I would be a little bit more like an engineering test than a business school test, where they'd have a problem to solve, and maybe we have to go through 2 or 3 or 4 steps to get to a problem. I found that was too much for a fair number of the students. So I'd cut it back. So maybe it's 2 steps to get to the problem or something like that. Or I lay the question out in multiple pieces, so you kind of, do it in bits. Right. And that's the way it goes. But I've listened to a few podcasts on education, and I studied what Synthesis was doing and their philosophy. And I think we're doing it wrong.
Okay, what's
And so because when you go through and take a test, let's say you do really bad on the first midterm, you do kind of okay on the second term, or maybe you do okay on the second midterm, but you do really great on the final. So the question is was that education cumulative? Did you test different materials for those 3 tests, something like that? And I think a better way to do this was to be able to create exercises such that people are not punished for the, let's say, doing bad on the first midterm, stripping, falling, because if they can, as long as they learn the material by the end of the class, they should get a good grade. And so how do you structure a process where you can evaluate what students are learning, and did they learn what you ultimately wanted them to learn? by the end of the class. So here you are. It's December 1st.
Right.
Did you know everything by December 1st? I don't really care that on on October 1st you didn't know the material. Like, right, you took the test, didn't do well, you didn't do great, but by the end of the semester you know it. So to me, I want to give you a good grade for that, right? So, because I want the exam to be a reflection of what you learned, not how you did on tests. That's one of the things that I didn't realize that the CFA Institute was doing so well, because what they're trying to do is they want you to know this certain amount of curriculum.
Yeah.
And if you do, you pass, you go to the next one. And I would kind of like it to be the same. And so I thought about how to do some of this, and maybe I think with younger folks, you guys have a lot of people are like kind of a gaming mentality. You know, a lot of gamers out there and doing some stuff. And can you structure a lot of the exercises that are teaching you something that also feel like a game? And so they're enjoyable to do the exercises. And so those are the things that I would like to do. And if I ever got some, and I've been looking for tools to kind of help doing that. And I have some hope that maybe some things with AI
No, I think I completely
would help me do that.
Yeah, I agree with the CFA point which you just mentioned. And because like I was also a finance grad once, and I used to learn FRM, like I was studying FRM. Can you keep the bottle this side? Yeah.
This side?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in the way. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like reading about FRM and everything, and I failed at the exam. But I was at the same time focusing on the skills which I can get from practically implying these concepts in the real world. And eventually what happened was I failed my part 1, and one of the other guy I knew, he passed part 1 and part 2 like in one go. And but after like we applied for a job, I had a better paying job and compared to him. So that's how it came to my mind, like, is these kind of exams really necessary? Like, are they really like helping people to teach? To some extent, I believe, but they're not igniting that thing in your brain which helps you to go beyond that and applying these things practically on your own. I know no one will come and teach you unless you are in a college doing an assignment or something, but it's not igniting that thing in people that they do it on their own. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's very good. You want to get that thing that helps people figure out what their interests are. There's very few people who go to college and say, I want to be a doctor. I mean, some do. And they go in the pre-med program. A bunch of them drop out because, it turns out to be too hard, or maybe they don't like the curriculum or whatever they have to do. But most kids come and go like, I have no idea what I want to do for a living, And so what courses do you take? And so how do you do things so that would ignite somebody's interest and sort of get something exciting going on? So my undergraduate degree is in mechanical engineering, and one of the reasons I went into that was because I like to make stuff. I used to take everything apart and put it back together for my parents. Like the washing machine would break, and my mom, I'd be like 10 years old, and my mom would say, she didn't want to call the repairman. She said, can you make the washing machine work again? So I'd drag it out, I'd take it apart, and go like, I got a broken belt, Mom. We need to go get a belt. Let's go down to the store, the hardware store, see if we can find one, and we'll put it on there and make it go. So I used to do that with everything. And
did it work?
Oh yeah, I used to. It was funny. My dad remarried. And his second wife, when I'd come out to visit them, he's passed away, God bless his heart, and she would always go, thank God you're here. Your father tried to fix these things. You have to go undo what he did, please. So, because I could look at stuff and figure out how to fix it. So that's where my interest was, and I got to do fun things. At Michigan, I installed solar panels on the engineering school. And so, because I was really interested in energy, during that time we had all these oil embargoes and oil spikes and insecurity of energy,
right?
And so I liked it anyway, and so I got a chance to go install some of these things, and had a lot of fun doing that. And I ended up going to work in construction, and then later on into aerospace, and we got to work on some really neat stuff. In aerospace, I worked on a ground-based and satellite-based anti-ballistic missile system. And so it's like, who was going to college saying, I want to go build missiles that shoot down missiles? But it was I loved working there. The people I worked with there, they were really nice people, really smart people too. And they were all really into the task of trying to solve these problems. And of course, it's DOD, so we had government clearance and various government clearances for what you worked on, secret and top secret. And, if you worked in a black project, you had to have a top secret clearance. And
is CIA still keeping eye on you?
I hope not.
Phone is not tapped.
I don't. It's been a long time. I don't think that I have any secrets. Although I was once recruited by CIA.
Oh.
Yeah, I got phone calls because I used to travel a lot. I worked in Indonesia for a period of time. Once I got out of business school, I wanted to do emerging market kind of stuff. And so a chance came up for me to go work with Indonesia's largest life insurance company. So I went down there, taught them how to manage the bank asset or the insurance company's assets. They didn't have any formal process. Very much having to do about education. So they had the equivalent of a high school education, would be their investment department. Right. People that they would call people with MBAs doctors. So it's just a ratchet down. The company had not done well with its investment, so the World Bank hired some people to go do that training, and then I learned that they didn't. Running an insurance company, you manage assets and liabilities together, and you run a strategy together. So I ended up staying there a lot longer than I thought because I had to these guys don't know how to do this either, so we should do a module on that. So I'd been working overseas a lot. I worked in London after that for ANZ Bank, and out of nowhere I got a call from the CIA.
Oh, randomly?
Yeah, and I think they might have maybe they found my resume on a job board for all I know. I don't really. They were very cryptic about how they found me, and it says, "Why are you interested?" You travel all over the world, so we need to send people all over the world, and stuff like that.
What was their assignment to you?
They wouldn't tell me. They just said I would go through some kind of training. And then they would send me someplace, and I tried to pin them down on what compensation looked like, and what kind of place do you stay in? Are you staying in a bungalow, or are you staying in a
bunker?
A bunker, it's am I staying in a 1-star,
lodge,
Fleabag lodge someplace? It's like they wouldn't tell me anything. And the funny part was they never gave me a phone number to call them.
Oh.
So they'd just say, okay, our next conversation will be at Thursday. I'll call you on Thursday at 2:00. So we'd have another conversation stuff. So we just couldn't find common ground. And I'm very patriotic, and I would have maybe entertained the idea. Most people don't know this, even of my friends, but my grandfather went into the Army as an enlisted man, and by the time he had passed over, he was a brigadier general. He worked his way to the top, and I was very proud of that I have somebody in my family that did something like that. He fought in World War I and World War II, and he was in charge of the Denver Mint for World War II. But in World War I, he was in the dirt. Fighting and stuff like that. But he passed before I was born. So, I love the country. So I'd like to, if I can do something to help the country, I would.
Yeah. So I think you have done a lot of stuff in your life, and I would treat it when it comes to education as a vocational thing which you have done. So it's kind of contrasting, which I'm going to ask you next, because right now you're a professor. And you might have seen a lot of debates on internet about college degree being a waste of money. And especially this debate comes
I
in.
have more to, go ahead on that.
Yeah, so especially this debate like arises when we talk about more of liberal colleges, liberal arts, and people who are studying those kind of things, because they don't learn anything practical there which they can apply in the real world. And then there's a debate arises that why are you paying like $100,000 on that kind of education where you're not going to learn anything.
Right.
But then people argue that no, we learn about analytical thinking, we learn about all these things like how to do the critical thinking and all this stuff. So like, what's your opinion on this debate of college degree being a waste of money?
To me, it depends upon the degree in the program.
Okay.
So I think about going to college from a very practical terms because, first of all, I was an engineer. Why did I want to go to college? I want to be an engineer.
Right.
So there was a path of why I was doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
My first thought is that you go to college to earn a skill that you can't learn any other way, that would lead to a career. So, for example, it might be for math, it might be science, chemistry, physics, law, medicine. I guess they call these STEM thingies, but that you basically need a credential in order to practice whatever it is that you want to practice. And so, for me, that's number one reason why you go to college. Second is, and I think taking classes in philosophy are important as an adjunct. I don't know how one makes a living as a philosophy major. Now, you might be able to take that and say, oh, I can become a superior marketing guy because you know how society works, how the brain works, all this kind of stuff, and how do you convince somebody to buy things and stuff like that. So I can see how those goes, but I always thought about those things not so much as you should do as a degree, but as an adjunct to the other things that you're doing to round yourself out. That's one. Things like art history, not to pick on those in particular, but psychology, I think it'd be a nice adjunct, but and if you want to be a psychologist, psychiatrist, as a profession, you've got to do that. I think knowing how to convince, if you're a negotiator, psychology would be very important.
Human
skill.
discourse department. It's about mostly about psychology.
Yeah. So they have, the question is you're going to spend a certain amount of money, and are you going to be able to find a career out of that? Out of that money you're going to spend, so you got to pay back your student loan if you're borrowing money to do it. Now, I've always been of the view of, listen, you've got plenty of money and you can go and leave school without debt and then go on with your life. This is like something you wanted to do for 4 years for your life. More power to you. Go for it, because you're not hamstringing yourself on options that you would have in the future. That you're trying to get started in life, and you're paying an apartment, you got a car, stuff like that. You want to save up money, get a house and stuff like that. But if you're carrying that load of student debt, it just pushes off when you can achieve those things to a later date. And so I think that's problematic. But I think if you're going to do something like art history, let's say, and like I said, not to pick on them, people that are going to work in museums, valuable. But how many jobs are there like that? So, and it reminds me of a story. I don't know if we recorded earlier about what my day was like as an engineer, but every Saturday I'd go to church at midnight mass. And I remember being at midnight mass in Ann Arbor. And the priest is having his talk, and he's going, if you think you're having a bad day or a bad year, let me tell you about this fella who just got a PhD in English. He applied to 100 colleges for a teaching position and got turned down on all 100. And so you've got to find something where the competition's not so keen. And I know a lot of people love the written word, and stuff like that. Some people take that and go to Hollywood and write scripts and whatever. You can do stuff, but that's, those are the, the top 1% or whatever, 10%, or somebody with a particular just natural skill anyway of storytelling or something like that. So, so that's my view. Is if in today's day and age, our society is becoming so technical that to the extent that you need education, you get a credential to do the job that you want. Then I think it makes sense to go to college. And
but what about those people who are building skills on their own, like learning from internet, because we have access to learning, and they're becoming, like, I know few people who don't, like, without even being into a college, they got a really nice job, high paying job, compared to someone who is a graduate from a college.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that's great, and particularly in the space of programming, because programming is a subject that you can teach yourself. And there's lots of people that teach themselves. And when you go for those kind of interviews, the people you're talking to across the table are going to ask you technical questions about how you would solve some code or write some code or something like that. You answer the question, you have the job. And so to the extent that you could teach yourself that, you don't have to get a license from the government to say, oh, you're allowed to write code. Thank goodness.
Unlike like being a doctor, being a lawyer, and a professional degree. So I completely agree with this. Like, if you want some professional degree where you need a certification and some credentials, you should go to college. But other than like, I've seen a lot of people, they don't go to college and they are like successful in their life.
Oh, very much so. And tradesmen, I have lots of respects for tradesmen. For number one, I used to work with tons of them as an engineer. Like we would design some electronics. We'd go out there and the guy would, install, controllers and switches and all kinds of stuff that we were doing for running the little plants that we would design and stuff like that. But the beauty of the trades, whether you are a welder, whether you're a carpenter, whether you're an electrician, any of these kind of important trade jobs, they can't be exported. That job cannot be shifted off to India or Mexico or China or someplace like that, and you don't use it up. So many people could do that. I mean, there are a fair amount of jobs on Wall Street that have been outsourced to Asia. It's a very interesting story. A friend of mine started a broker-dealer, and he was focusing on mid-sized insurance companies, and those are companies that just get ignored by the Goldman Sachs and the J.P. Morgans and the Morgan Stanleys of the world, because they don't have enough money to, people don't want to cover them. They're not going to make enough commission money. So they have a tougher time getting coverage and stuff like that. And then a friend of mine hired to do research on various things that people wanted to do. He hired a firm in India would write the research. He sent out some research to his customers, and then he got a phone call, and he said, how did you know what Morgan Stanley was going to put in their research reports? And he's going like, well, what do you mean? Like, well, I just got a report from Morgan Stanley, and it looks an awful lot like what you sent me 2 days ago.
Okay.
They're using the same. They're outsourcing a fair amount of this, and then because the way the industry is morphed is, research people on Wall Street are much more salesmen-y than they are pure researchy. In the old days, it was pure research. They did research. If you bring them in when customers want to talk about a particular name or whatever, they published. And they were doing all that in New York City. And then to save costs, everybody's always trying to save cost. They would have tons of that preliminary work done, and maybe all they do is reformat it and package it in New York, and off it goes. Get the logo on, everything else. And that's what they did. They hired the same firm to write the same thing, and they're going to do what they're going to do. If I can sell the same product 9 times, they're going to maximize their revenue and profit that way. So there's a lot of things on Wall Street that can get outsourced. Trade processing and stuff, especially as it goes electronic. And that's an area that I have a lot of concern for. All this thing that happens after the trade, all the middle office, back office kind of activity, accounting, filing forms with the government and stuff like that. A lot of that is just going to get automated, and it's in the process of being automated now. So I have a lot of concern that when we teach people various things here, that they might be going into a job that could disappear in 4 or 5 years.
And because I think one of the reasons is also that they can hire cheap people from like third world countries, and because they can make those people work the same thing like on a lower cost. So that is something which they can do. And they're doing it, I think.
We have tons of that. That was probably one of the biggest reasons why we had inflation get crushed in the U.S. So if you think about the U.S., we had a huge bout of inflation in the 70s. Inflation was terrible. And then two things happened in 1980. Number one was about 500 million Chinese people moved from farms to factories. And so you're all of a sudden employing people, and they got a better deal. They were making more money working in a factory in China than they were on the farm, and they were going. So they were made better off in that process. But they are competing to make product that we were manufacturing in the U.S., and so a lot of companies in the U.S. would outsource the manufacturing to places like that. Now, when they had a little reprieve in that process, and that when the Tiananmen Square incident took place, nobody wanted to be involved with China anymore. So that got people to switch the manufacturing to Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia, Malaysia, those countries. And those countries, got way overheated, resulted in, amongst other things, the great financial crisis of Asia back then. Things blew up. Then things kind of came back to China again after that. But lots of jobs were lost here in the U.S. People that had good jobs in the Midwest. You could make, in our heyday, 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the early 80s, you could graduate from high school, go work in a factory, earn enough money to buy a home, drive the car that you like, send your kids to school, get decent health care, all that other kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden those things got shipped overseas, and they went through terrible problem of trying to retool themselves and find something new and interesting that they could do with their time. So,
and I think a similar thing is happening in like Silicon Valley, because they are outsourcing a lot of things to India, and I've seen, because a lot of people are working with companies from Silicon Valley and all these places. Speaking of Silicon Valley, I think you're from California. You told me about that, and we were just discussing about the California fire which happened, and I really want, I don't know anything about that, so what kind of thing is happening in California with this wildfire?
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I grew up in a little city called Sierra Madre. And then next to Sierra Madre, going a little bit west, is Altadena, where the big part of the fire was. And then all the other side was in La Cañada. So later on, when I went from grade school, I lived in Sierra Madre, and then in high school, I lived in La Cañada. And went to a college prep school there. So I know that area really well. In fact, my dad's favorite sandwich shop is in Altadena. And it was just a place that you pull up in your car, you walk up to a window, you order a sandwich, and then you drive away with it. There was no place to eat inside or something like that. And they did have the greatest sandwiches. But what's happened there is... it's a place that is very dry. California, most of California is a desert. Los Angeles is a desert, and I'm always reminded that when I go back, because I always go it's so green here, where we live in New Jersey. There's tons of trees, and I guess they call it the Garden State for a reason. And then you just see, there's eucalyptus trees, and there's these kind of trees that just don't use much water. and you realize how dry it is too. You know, the air is much drier and stuff like that. So you have to be very vigilant in all of this. But California suffers from a problem of too much regulation. So you basically can't do anything in California without breaking the law.
What kind of regulation, like to start a business?
Any kind of, for example, they're trying to build a high-speed rail from San Francisco to LA. And I think they've already spent something like $12 billion or $18 billion, some ridiculously large sum of money. And they've laid down a couple of miles where they could put rails on them. And that's it. It's like China would have built an entire high-speed rail system and be done and up and going right now. Yeah. The environmental regs are tough. They've got to properly compensate people if they take their property, and which is all fine. But there's the legal work that you have to do in order to get a permit to do anything. Just brings everything to a screeching halt. They have a lot of, and it comes down to little things like. The electric company up in San Francisco, when they had a fire and a lot of people passed away, the electric company wanted to cut back trees away from the power lines, and the environmental regs didn't allow them to do that. You know, you can't. They're making our place a nice green, nice place, so. You couldn't cut away the brush to stay away from electric wires, and then there's a bad day, there's a really hot day. The wires get too hot, they sag, they touch a branch, start a fire, and all hell breaks loose. And since it's dry in there, because it's very deserty, once something starts, it goes like mad, and they just fire up like mad. So.
How bad was it, like for the residents living there?
Oh, I think right now they're saying that something like 40,000 acres have been built between all the different spots. And I think that's just a really huge number that you can't get your arm around. And then could you think about how many thousands of houses? Is that 10,000 houses? Is that 20,000 houses? Are there 20,000 families now that don't have? And you think about average families, 3 people. So you've got 60,000 people. All of a sudden don't have a place to live. Yeah. So the first thing I started to read was that there's a mad dash to go rent houses and apartments. So all those Airbnbs are going to get rented out for full-time houses. And so as messed up as the real estate market is there, because real estate is very expensive, that's probably just going to get a little bit worse. Now, there's a couple things going around why this happened. I've seen one video that showed power wires hitting trees and starting a fire. I've seen a bunch of videos the last 2 days where they're catching arsonists.
What's that?
Somebody who starts fires.
Okay.
They come out with a torch and they just start lighting stuff on fire. Yeah, so that's something new. Now, I don't know if that's who started these things, or they're just whack jobs. They're going like, hey, let's get in on the action. You know, some person that's not entirely balanced.
Do you think this is like a conspiracy theory? I think you did mention about this.
Oh, listen, who knows? I've lived long enough to know that I don't know very much, but I have educated guesses.
Lots of guess.
On lots of things. So it is possible. Now, there's also, the best conspiracy theory I saw so far was a woman came on I think it was a YouTube video I watched, and she said it was only the houses with the smart meters that burnt down. Because the smart meters, they can control the flow of gas into the house. People by and large use natural gas to heat their homes there. But some people have electricity, but some are natural gas. And the environmentalists want it to be all electricity. They don't want natural gas at all. So that's why they're doing things like making it illegal to have a gas stove in California. If you build a new home, or the builders can't put a gas stove in the new building. So it's a little heavy-handed on the regulation. But I saw that and I'm going like, seriously? There's a lot of things that I would think of, but that was not one that I would think of. And I don't put any weight on it at this stage of the game. It's just like, okay, it's a conspiracy theory. And so we'll see what comes of it. We'll just follow what's going on. What I think is remarkable is how many days is it now? Is it 6 days, 7 days?
Yeah, it's been
and they still have fires that are out of control.
Yeah.
They're just going from one place, wiping out the neighborhood, and then going to the next place, wiping out the neighborhood. I got to go on Google Maps or Google Earth and see if the houses that I grew up in burnt down. So that's something I was going to do over the weekend at least, and see what's going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on. They were very slow to respond, so that seems to be a really big deal. That people were reporting fires,
right,
and nobody showed up for 45 minutes or an hour, and that's pretty bad.
Yeah. So, talking about conspiracy theories, I really want to talk more about it, because I think you have a pretty good idea about conspiracy theories, and I want to know your opinion on that. So the first one was because let's make it interesting. Let's talk about aliens and UFOs. What do you think about aliens and UFOs? And what about the secret thing which US is doing with Area 51, with alien portals and all these things? Okay.
So all those folks think that a craft crashed at area in I forget where it was, but we recovered a spacecraft, and so the invention of the silicon chip, for example, was done by reverse engineering. Because before that, we had tubes that were transistors, and to turn a transistor into a silicon chip, big thing. So lots of things like that supposedly came out of it. Now, it could very well be that that's just where the government, Area 51, they try stuff out. It's away from the world. They don't want other countries to know what they're doing. It makes perfect sense that if you were going to do some kind of stealth aircraft or whatever, that you wouldn't want the whole world to know that you're doing it while you're doing it. You want to pull that baby out when the shit hits the fan, and have an edge up on the rest of the world. So maybe there's stuff there, maybe there's not. There's this fellow Bob Lazar. He's talked about. He used to work there, and he's told the world various things what he does, and we don't have sort of that hard truth. You see videos of an alien or something.
We do see those videos, but we don't know if it's
they're true. Yeah, it's like somebody could do CGI.
Yeah.
And make that stuff happen. So and it's even worse now with AI. Because there's so many things people do with AI, and they don't need to be very skilled, and they can make something very real. I saw the most incredible drone, and I said, man, if this is what's going on, we are in trouble, man, because this thing is so technical. They opened it up, and there's all kinds of gauges and all kinds of other things that you could see that was running the thing remotely.
Yeah.
And then somebody told me, yeah, I saw that too, and that was really AI, an AI picture of the thing. And I'm going well, I breathe a little bit easier now that thing wasn't real, but it looked so real that it could be real. Now you can't believe your eyes when you see something on TV. That used to be the arbiter before. You see something happen, you see the words spoken, you know if whatever happened in that situation. Now it could be completely made up, and nobody would know the difference, and we can all get spoofed for all of that. So. Yeah, I like a good conspiracy theory because they're fun to talk about. I have no idea if any of these, these kind of things are.
So, what's the most interesting theory which you have heard?
I don't know about the most interesting theory. I don't know. I don't really have one. But my favorite TV show was The X-Files.
Oh, okay.
And I watched that show religiously because it all started out about UFOs.
Okay.
And so after the first couple of seasons, the series kind of got a little tired because you can only beat that subject so many times. But then they went into government intrigue about how the government was covering up and cutting deals with the aliens and stuff like that, and things like that, and all this other paranormal stuff. So they gave you a lot of conspiracy theories in there that is just fun. I just think it's fun to sort of fantasize about what could be. I think from my perspective, how many millions of suns are there? How many hundreds or tens of whatever planets around all those stars?
Yeah.
And how many of those stars, what percentage of those stars or those planets could inhabit life potentially? Even if it's like 0.01% or 0.001%. Since there's millions and millions of planets out there, it just seems really hard for me to believe that we're the only ones here in the entire universe.
Right.
And so that's why I kind of entertain the idea of it.
Yeah.
We don't have necessarily the kind of proof that we'd like to have, like talking to somebody. We have these sightings of aircraft, and we had, I guess it was in the 50s or 60s, there was a whole bunch of craft that were hovering over the White House, and then they disappeared. And then they had that one episode in Arizona where something like 1 million people, and it was Phoenix, I think, saw these series of lights, a bunch of lights, and they were hovering and moving around and stuff like that. There's a guy named Ed Grimsley, and what he does is he took night vision goggles, and he married that up with telescopes. And so you can go find these videos up on YouTube. And it shows, and so he's put up these videos that shows various spacecraft flying around up there, some of them fighting with each other, but all making what are clearly couldn't be asteroids, because they go like this and then they change direction and stuff like that, and they go up and various things.
I've seen that video.
So he's put a bunch of them, and they look green because of that green kind of thing for the night vision goggles have that green background. Right. So is there something to do that? I don't know. Is the guy just a CGI expert and just hoaxing the hell out of all of us? I don't know. I don't have goggles, so I can't, or, it's night vision glasses, so I can't go try it out myself and take a look up there.
Yeah, no, but I think Pentagon was a company, like Pentagon was, I don't know what's Pentagon, but they released some classified documents which revealed about UFOs and everything. And there was also something which happened recently in 2024 when the drones were flying in US. I think it was around Florida or something. So it was flying around there, and people were thinking that either it's some kind of alien invasion sort of thing, or maybe it's kind of some other countries are looking up and flying around and
it could be
secrets.
Well, it's kind of funny. We had the Chinese send those balloons over the US, and they were there forever. And it's like, seriously, is anybody keeping track of this? I mean, I just find that remarkable. It's like these balloons are flying, but I wonder what they are. I wonder what they're doing here. Like, who put those up there? It's like, it boggles my mind that would go on forever, for days and days and days. And the only reason why the government shoots them down is because there's so much hoopla on the internet about what these things are. And so I guess we ought to go address this thing and see what it is.
What do you think about the moon landing which happened? Some people think that it was a fake moon landing and it was all CGI and it was made up. Yeah,
well, it certainly could be. Now, Stanley, they credit Stanley Kubrick who is a producer and director. He did 2001: A Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut, some really famous stuff. He said, and before he passed away, that he had done all of that, and it was his opus magnus. It's like his greatest accomplishment to pull off this hokey thing. And I always wondered, listen, when I was at that age, I was a little kid in school. I was like 4th grade, 5th grade. I remember in 4th grade doing a little presentation to my class about the moon landing, the Saturn V rocket, and all of that kind of stuff, because I thought it was the greatest thing that we went there and did that and stuff like that. But nobody ever really asked the question after the fact. At that time, there was no such thing as a cell phone. Right? But yet we can communicate freely. Richard Nixon, the president of the time, was talking to the guys on the moon through a telephone in real time. Yeah. And the little beep in the background, like beep, like something's going to make it sound official, right? So I never really thought about it for years and years and years until this became an issue and people wanted to start talking about it. Yeah. I thought to myself, there are a bunch of things here that don't really add up. There's a picture of the underside of somebody's boot, their spacesuit boot, and it's got a different tread mark than what's the treads that are on the surface of the moon, stuff like that. One of the things I had a big question about is, how did they get a little car up there?
Yeah.
So, because that thing's huge.
Yeah.
And it's not like they somehow got it up there and it's going to bring it down with the command module and all that stuff, or the lunar module that came down. And that's the one I always had. It's like, man, that's amazing. They got a car up there. How did they do that? It's like unbelievable. Yeah. And so, and then years later, I'm going like, maybe not. And then I go and I think about, well, what was the context of that? That was during the Cold War.
Yeah.
The Russians were killing us in space. They put the first dog in space, the first person in space, all that other stuff. And there's a little bit of national pride. There's like, is capitalism better than communism? All this kind of stuff. And so we better do something to, flex our bicep here. Otherwise, we're going to look pretty silly. And then, so that's one way to determine if, or to just say, hey, we're going to win any conflict with the Russians.
Right.
So that was that. So I could see that a reason why, we would kind of the government would make up that whole thing, because we had to say, the best way to beat the Russians is not to have a war. Just like, okay, how about we just all give up on this, and if they give up first, we'll give up. This arms race of doing whatever. It's really silly about how many nuclear weapons we and they have.
Yeah, like it's very scary. Like if I think about it, like someday if something happens, I don't know what will happen to the world if all of them
they'll start flying. And Russia's got nuclear subs parked off Manhattan. And of course they do.
I didn't know that.
And Washington, D.C., and I'm sure we've got subs parked off of various parts of the Baltic Sea and Europe and everything else, and they don't do anything. They just keeping an eye on people and stuff like that, and they need to attack, they can come to the surface, and these things will hold a dozen, 20 nuclear warheads, all of which could cause, probably kill us all. So it's all a game of this thing about mutually assured destruction. So we know you're not going to start this war, because if you do, we're going to turn you into a parking lot, and then of course you're going to turn us into a parking lot. So maybe it's best we don't go ahead and do this, but you got to feed the military-industrial complex to.
And like you don't know a lot of stuff.
So we don't. We have no idea what goes on.
Exactly. And I think like, do you know about this JFK files, like John F. Kennedy's files controversy which is happening? Because I think Joe Rogan and Donald Trump was speaking about this in the podcast also,
Mm-hmm.
that there is whole controversy about these files, what exactly happened, and U.S. government know everything about it. And Donald Trump said that I have looked the files, like I have seen it,
Yeah.
and I don't know like if we are planning it to release it, but sometime like soon it will be released. There's a file about Martin Luther King also. So there are a lot of things which they are going to
Yeah.
reveal. But he didn't reveal it in his previous session. I'm not sure if he's going to do it right now, but I think it will be a huge risk. So like, what do you know about this? Like I read it about like recently.
Yeah, I would hope they would release it. There's no reason now because all the people involved have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to protect an individual, like the true shooter,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's not the true shooter. There's some people say it was the driver of the car that actually shot Kennedy.
Oh, really?
That they turned around and you can't sell the Magruder film is so grainy
Yeah.
that I wouldn't draw any conclusion. But one of them was he turned like that, and it could have been that he was saying he turned before the shot, not after the shot, and stuff like that. But there's others that there was an X-Files on this one, and the shooter was in the sewer on the side of the road. So out there in that part of the world, they'd have these big concrete blocks, and then there's a big round manhole you could crawl down there. And in that X-File, it was the smoking guy, the smoking man. I forget if he actually had a real name or not. He went in there and was actually the guy that shot Kennedy. So there were somebody else, and so people said, "Hey, there were other bullets that they don't, or bullet marks that they can't account for." And things like that. So I would like to do it, and just so that we all know, I think it was a terrible event in our country's history.
Yeah. Do you think they have buried the files of his postmortem report and everything?
I don't know. I don't know. My first rule of government is they lie, and so they don't. So you never really know what the truth is. That's that old saying with war: the first thing that dies in a war is the truth, because you don't know who started it and who's doing what to whom and stuff like that. All you know is there's just massive carnage at the end of the whole thing.
Right.
The particulars of that I don't know, but I know there was a TV show called Conspiracy Theories with Jesse Ventura. Did you ever watch this?
Absolutely. I've heard about it, never watched.
So he did one on the Kennedy assassination too, and he just said he tried, and he says it's impossible to shoot. I don't remember how many numbers of rounds he fired off, but it was impossible to shoot that many rounds in a few seconds or whatever it was, 10 seconds, that they actually fired off. That it's like, I don't know if it was, you got to like every time or whatever. So, it's like one of those things. It's all the pieces don't really fit together. There's questions that people have.
I think one of the interesting
things like that,
which I've heard about this theory was related to, and I think people also do talk about Joe Biden in this sense that all these things, like whatever events happened, like in last few years, like few decades, it's all controlled by the secret society. Like people sometimes call it Illuminati, Freemasons, and all of these things. Like
Skull and Bones from Yale.
Oh, okay.
All the presidents are Skull and Bones.
Really?
I think so.
So what's your
Skull and Bones is some club up in Yale, and it's not very big, but John Kerry was Skull and Bones, George Bush Jr., W as one of these characters. Is there something to it? I obviously don't know, because I never met anybody that was there and stuff like that, that was a member and things like that. So, but there's this you see that come up from time to time. People talked about that a lot, like 15, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't talked about it so much since. And then, of course, you've got what's that place in California, in the forest? I forget what it's
Area
called.
51?
No, it's in California. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
People, very powerful people, get together and do whatever it is that.
Epstein Island.
No, not Epstein Islands. That's in California.
Okay.
It's in the redwoods of California. I forget what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
And they get together like every now and again, and they throw big toga parties and and stuff like that. And there's a big owl there, and it looks like some mischief,
Mm-hmm.
some demonic mischief perhaps goes on there. So I don't. It's there's all these things that you see, and they're, like I said, they're fun and entertaining.
Yeah.
I do not lose one minute of sleep about these things, or that something terrible is going to happen to me or whatever, or the world, because these people are making all kinds of decisions that we don't know about. Bohemian Grove. It's called Bohemian Grove.
Okay. I think I've heard about this conspiracy theory.
Yeah. So people get together, and they're politicians, business people, media people, and stuff like that. And who knows what they do there? But it's a private place, and if you ever try to get into there, that somebody will find you in the woods. Like, people try to sneak in from the woods and try to see what's going on there, and they'll take some pictures. Alex Jones did a pretty big bit on this quite a long time ago, and that's probably how I heard about it. Was listening to him one time, and he was talking about this thing at Bohemian Grove, and I go like, what? I've been up there. It's up to the redwoods, beautiful country, and we got to vacation and camp there as a little kid, up in Yosemite and Sequoia and these places.
I think I've heard that recently from someone that Joe Biden was sort of controlled by these Freemasons because he didn't have his own control over things. So maybe he was controlled by these people. I don't know, like, if that's true or not.
I don't think it was too hard to control Joe Biden. There's a guy that was a taco short of a Fiesta platter.
Yeah.
I think it's remarkable that people didn't understand or denied his decline in cognitive ability, because he was such a flamboyant guy in his younger age, and he was full of big, strong opinions, and he was kind of a funny guy,
really,
to listen to. Great storyteller, rarely told the truth, and he went to taught at colleges he never taught at, and all these kind of things that he would do, and things that he had done that he'd never really done, but he was he's king of puffery and storytelling. It's like I said, it's the way government people are. They tell stories, and the government has to tell lies, because you wouldn't do half the shit that you do if you thought if they told you the truth. Like, they see how they waste your tax money. Like, your generation is really brutalized in our country. So when I was a kid growing up, the national debt was $100 billion, and something like that. I think it became $1 trillion in 1980, kind of like when I'm getting out of grad. I'm coming out of undergraduate. Maybe it wasn't even that much. So the government's not spending that much money on interest. Now the government spends as much money on interest, on $1.4 trillion. They collect like 2.7 trillion in personal income tax, and half of that goes to interest on the debt, like you're not getting any services for that.
Right.
And so it's really unfair. So would people have let the government spend money on all this crazy stuff that they spent money on if they told them the truth that, this and that? And governments are notoriously bad. In California, they spent $28 billion, I think the number was. It's been a story lately. $28 billion in the last 3 years to house homeless people, and I think they haven't produced an apartment yet, or they're getting near the point where they can deliver an apartment. And the apartments are ultimately, when they get finished, they think will cost over $1 million a piece to go. So the government is not particularly competent, and it's.
Is this like a particular government or?
No, it's all government.
Okay.
No, it's the nature of the government, because the way business works is businesses do things that people want them to do at a reasonable price. If you can't do those things, then you go out of business, right? If you got a product that's too expensive, nobody will buy it.
Yeah.
Everything's voluntary. Person who buys it is voluntary. Person who makes it is voluntary. Government, nothing is voluntary. You pay your tax or go to jail. There's a lot of people that want to get government contracts and then they try to charge the government whatever. When I worked in aerospace defense, you could see how a hammer could cost the government, $2,500 because there's what's called a prime contractor, and then they have subcontractors. And subcontractors could hire subcontractors, and subcontractors could hire more subcontractors. So there could be one subcontractor that buys a hammer for $20 or whatever it is, let's say, $10, and then it's part of a whole kit that they're doing, and so they add an overhead and profit and all that other stuff. And so that gets sold to the next subcontractor who does the same thing. Well, they had their purchasing people, that's expense, they've got overhead, they got this or that. So before you know it, you do that 3 or 4 times, and that product has been marked up by 8 different people, and it sells for, the government pays a stupid price. So you could see how it has happened. And one of my roles when I was in aerospace was to price contracts and negotiate contracts, which is where I worked with Tiger Woods' dad, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, Tiger Woods' dad was a contract negotiator at McDonnell Douglas, where I worked. And he was very good friends with the guy that I shared an office with. And he used to come into our office, talk every day, and talk about his son and what a great golfer he was and stuff like that, and tell stories about his son golfing. I enjoyed Earl. Earl was he was a very friendly guy, and he helped me either with my resume or my applications to graduate school. I can't remember, because he had a Mac.
Right.
And I had an old IBM PC, and back in those days, if you wanted to bold, you had to highlight it and go Control Shift Alt Go, and then there was no WYSIWYG, there was none of graphical user interfaces. So, but in any event, we were like super diligent of like when we were going to propose something to the government that we're doing it at the lowest price.
Okay.
I mean, it was because we're a prime contractor on various things. I remember working on the space station. I did just for a little bit. And that's probably, if I went back there after graduate school, I probably would have gone to work on the space station. But I remember working on these big programs, and they're like $50 billion, and you're trying to find experts who can make certain parts that you want. And then my job was to figure out how many people is it going to take to make it? What kind of machines do they need to make it? All of that's basically on paper, make the products, figure out what I thought it was going to cost to make, and then we would sit down and negotiate contracts to pay them for their parts. So it was a very legitimate process that was designed to make prices really low. But we would have, I remember, Northrop, they were like the worst. They're the ones that did the helicopter with the little telescope on top. I don't know if you know, we have these helicopters so that they can see over the horizon. The telescope is on top of the helicopter, and it comes out of the shaft that's inside the engine. And of course, that thing is vibrating like mad because it's an engine, right? And it's doing all this stuff. So it was a super intense piece of engineering to be able to isolate that so that it would stay absolutely dead still like that. And so that was one of the products they were famous for. I think they worked on stealth as well. But they were always classics at trying to get us to pay 3 or 4 times what the true cost was. So we'd go process it and go like, this guy's out of his mind. And so then we would go, because they would throw a number out there. Well, I think it's going to cost $10 million. They'd just say, well, we'll do it for you for 50. And then, of course, we'd have these negotiations to get the price down to something that was reasonable and gives them a fair return on equity. So
no, a lot of people do this in India also, and they try to get some government contracts so that they can earn a lot of money. So yeah, this happens I think all over the place. Because
the entrepreneurs and business managers watch their money very closely. Nobody in Congress watches money. They write checks like there's no tomorrow, and they don't care how it's spent because their constituents, want them to do various things. And the lobbyists get them to do and spend money on various things, and it's you can't get rid of a program once it gets started. So in the defense aerospace area, the way they make a project last forever is, let's say they're going to make a new fighter jet. So what they do is they try to organize the legislation such that there are subcontractors in every state of the country that will provide some parts to the aircraft. Everybody contributes. So basically, every congressman, every senator says I'm bringing home some money to the state. So once they're all in, you can't get them to say, no, I'm going to cut that out, because they got to go back home and said, that those federal dollars aren't going to roll in to the state anymore. We're cutting our budget, and so that's why you'll see defense systems that are really out of date continue to be manufactured and stuff
because
like
they
that.
Can make money out of it.
So they got everybody tied in.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
If it was one guy's district, let's say everything was being made in California, all the other states representatives from the other states could bang up and get California taking all this money. They would just knock them out. They'd outvote them and they'd be done. So that's how it works.
Right. So talking about the government, recently Trump came in. I have a lot of questions around that, because I think we were discussing about how liberals act, whatever the idea about that. So I just wanted to start with this first. Firstly, tell me what will happen if now the Trump is coming, and what are the changes you think will be happening compared to what happened in the previous government, and also after this, just also talk about what went wrong with Democrats this time, when Kamala came and the Joe Biden was replaced by her, everything about that.
Yeah. Okay. So. Trump's first term. I think most people believe that his mistakes in his first term, people that wanted lots of reform, that his mistake is that he brought in too much of the Republican establishment that were just part of what people like to call the uniparty, that there's not that much difference between Democrats and Republicans. They're just speaking to different constituents, or they have different donors. But it's one of the dangers of having the government so big is because when your guys in power, they steal all the money for their friends, and then you've got to get them out so that you can steal the money for your friends and your supporters and stuff like that. But so I think that. And that probably makes a fair amount of sense, because all those people are part of the traditional establishment. Remember, the traditional Republican establishment was vehemently against him when he ran the first time. They thought there was no chance that he was going to get any votes at all. People forget he did like test runs for president a couple, 2-3 times earlier in his life. He would start out kind of, because, I talked about Oprah. He used to be on Oprah all the time. And she would ask him, are you going to run for president? Because he'd say, yeah, the way we're getting ripped off. And this, the same stories he's talking today. 25 years ago, still saying the same thing. But he said, I don't really want to because I enjoy my work and doing what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. But I said, if I really came to it, if I ran, I'd run to win. So a couple of times he put his toe in the water to see if, check the wind.
Yeah.
And he didn't get some quick traction. And I don't know why he felt he got traction in 2015-16 when he started that. But I think his problem was he thought he could, because the way Washington works is Republicans are in party. They bring in all their Republican friends and people part of the Republican Party to take all the decision-making positions within the government. And then the Democrats win, and then all those guys get fired. And in fact, the tradition is that when the other party wins, that all the heads of these other departments tender their resignation. They don't even wait to get fired. They tender their resignation.
From
then,
the other party.
Yeah. And then if the president wants to keep him, he'll call him and say, I'm not going to accept your resignation. I want you to stay. But for the most part, everybody knows that it's, you're on the red team or the blue team. And when your team's not in power, you got to go work for a lobbyist. You got to go work for industry someplace. You got to be a consultant. You got to do something, and you sit around and wait for your team to win again. That's why I've been around on this planet a long time, and every time it goes, it's like each team keeps bringing back their own henchmen. 20, 30, 40 years later.
Yeah. So, do you think that Trump was a good decision?
I do, because I'd like to have how do I want to say this? There could be different ways of doing things and more efficiently. We're not doing anything efficiently. We were on a $2 trillion government budget deficit. We're on the path to bankruptcy, and a lot of people think it doesn't matter because the government can print money and they'll never go bankrupt. That is true, but what they do is they bankrupt the entire country, the private sector too. So people forget what happens in Argentina and things like that when the government takes over and they collapse and they have a huge amount of debt and they default on their debt and stuff like that. They devastate, the overall economy itself and private people and their wealth. So I'm one of the I have a firm belief that government shouldn't borrow money because it aids corruption. Because if I am collecting $1 billion of taxes and I pass out $1 billion worth of goodies or services to the people that paid into it, there's no slush in there to go pay off the people that financed your campaign, or you do all these other things that keep you in power. But if you can go borrow some money and then just shoot a check over to those guys, then it enables the corruption that goes in. It's harder to
do that, borrow money from.
Oh, we do it, and the way the system is set up, it has to be. One of the things that most people don't realize is the government has come up, started publishing this stuff. This started under Clinton. Clinton said, I wanted honest books. Governments run on cash accounting. That means dollars in, dollars out. There's no depreciation, all this other kind of stuff that goes into a normal corporate thing, right? Or if you get a liability so let's say the government promises to pay me $1 billion in 10 years, no budget impact. The budget is balanced. It's balanced. Let's say it's balanced before. They promised to give me $1 billion in 10 years, still balanced. In 10 years, it becomes unbalanced. That's when the cash gets paid. So the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and these kind of programs are underfunded by about $150 trillion. So they take, for the next, I think it's 100 years, all the money they expect to pay out in those programs, and then they subtract from that all the taxes, like your Social Security tax, Medicare tax, all that kind of stuff, and they match that up. Then there's a net cash shortfall. What's the present value of that number? That's something like $160 trillion. Now, Lawrence Kotlikoff, who is a professor at one of the colleges up in Boston, I want to say Boston U, but I'm not sure. He estimates the number over $200 trillion. That's how much we're underfunded. Which means for the government to balance its budget on a GAAP accounting basis, if they spent no money, they would still be running at a loss, as it were. And then in the documents the Treasury puts out now, they calculate that number.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they do. It's in like a 350-page document for that the Treasury puts out once a year.
Okay.
So
what's the number on that? Like 150 or 200?
It's like in the last time I saw it was like 150, 160. I saw the report from a couple of years ago, and that was it. So, no, we're in trouble on that, and I think it's terrible for your generation because, like I said, so much of your tax money is going to pay interest, pay for past sins. It's not going to get you a better school. It's not going to get you a better road. It's not going to get you better bridges, medical breakthroughs, or all these things that you might think. High-speed rail, New Jersey Transit's not the fastest moving train on earth, but for sure. So our infrastructure's not very good. We pay for, we get second-class stuff. I was... Now the people who listen from New York are going to scream and yell at me, greatest city in the world. Well, subway systems like in Singapore are so much better than in New York. I mean, it's like not even close.
In Hong Kong, in Japan,
And Hong Kong is very nice. I've never been to Japan, but in Hong Kong the rapid transit system much more efficient. In Singapore, it's the train stations are air conditioned. So you walk into the train stations that you're not air conditioned here in New York, and they're fast, reliable, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a really kind of a harsh deal for you guys, because our job as people is to make the world a little bit better, so for our kids that come behind us, and then they're to do the same, and they're to do the same, and we all progress and get a little bit better. And that we're at the first time now where your generation may not have it better than my generation, which I think is a shame. It's a real shame.
So what do you think about this thing of free speech? Because I think this is happening a lot in like United States when it comes to colleges, universities, and most of these liberal students come with a certain ideologies. And I think you were talking something about being an authoritarian. Like when you express these kind of things, like what do you think about all these things?
Well, free speech is the most important thing if you're going to run a democracy. Don't say somebody's a threat to democracy while you're telling them to shut up. Those two things don't go together. And it's about free exchange of ideas. You might not like my ideas. That's okay. I might not like your ideas. That's okay. But maybe we learn a little bit something. I think there's a saying that I don't know who said it, but I've never learned anything from somebody I agreed with. Because one of the ways I learn about political issues and stuff, if you're telling me things that I don't know or not aware of, so long as they're truthful, I learn something from that, and I improve whatever thoughts that I might have, will have better solutions to problems. But if you said the only person that has the right to solve this problem is this person over here, you're not going to get obviously the best solution by definition.
Yeah.
You're excluding people from the process, and then of course you're telling people who are not part of the process how they got to behave and what they got to do and how much they got to pay and all that kind of stuff. So, and that's why free speech is the first of the amendments.
Yeah.
It's there. That's like we got to be able to talk about this and hash these things out. And to the extent that you're not allowed to talk about things, it's misinformation. Just because we have a different opinion doesn't mean there's disinformation. That's getting into facts. If you want to start arguing facts, then our free speech allows us to support whatever view that we have, and we should have some facts that point that view that doing things this way you'll be successful, doing things that way you will not be successful. Here's examples of doing it your way didn't work. Here's examples doing it my way did work. Okay, so does that mean something to you? If it doesn't, then
it's okay. If it doesn't, that's fine. Like you can just go on and just...
or the other way around. So people have told me things, a lot of things. It's like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's the way this thing worked.
Yeah.
And so I like it. I have a fair number of friends that if I voice opinions that are contrary to what they're being told on the evening news or the New York Times or whatever, they get really angry at me. Like there's something wrong with me, and I'm going like, why are you getting angry? We're just talking.
Yeah.
If you think I'm wrong, just explain to me where I'm wrong. Don't sit there and say you're wrong and you're an idiot and move on.
Yeah.
You just get it. Why am I wrong? What am I saying that is wrong? Do you have some examples of doing things my way and it failed? Whatever. And I don't really get agitated. So after I have a long conversation like that, I'm not mad. My blood pressure's not up. Heartbeat's still 65 beats a minute. So I never really understand people that get upset if you voice a different opinion, or they all of a sudden don't like you because you have a different opinion, or stuff like that. So, and the older I get, the more I like to talk about stuff and things like that. So I think it's incredibly important, and we shouldn't try to stop it. And I think to the extent that, Mark Zuckerberg was just on Joe Rogan's talking about, and they talked a lot about, I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, I'm about halfway through. But they talked a lot about what they said the FBI was calling up his people and screaming and yelling at him, telling them to take this stuff down, and they're going like, well, we can't take it down. It's true. What the guy is saying is true. We don't like it. So, and this was coming from Biden administration to take stuff down.
What was that stuff?
The biggest thing they yelled about was anything having to do with the vaccine. So people were saying about safety, about all these other kind of issues and things and that. They said that was the biggest one they got screamed and yelled at a lot. So that's not a good thing. The government shouldn't be calling these people up and saying what they can put on their website and what they can. It'd be nice if there was some kind of legal mechanism that if you said something that is untrue, we have slander laws in the U.S. So if and you're not a public figure, so if I said a bunch of things about you that's not true, and I said it to the world, then you could sue me for defamation of character, for saying things about you that are not true. I don't know why it's the case. That's not the case if you're a public figure.
Right.
So if you're the president, you could say, or a congressman, or a governor, or a city councilman, you can say anything you want about them. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not. And it seems to me I'd like to have something that there would be a mechanism that there's like a fine, or at least, that there's something, there's like a board you could go to that would adjudicate it, and and say, yeah, what he's saying is not true, and you have to apologize.
Yeah.
You have to publicly apologize. You got to pay him $10. I don't know.
No, I think this has happened a lot, like mainly on Twitter, like the cancel culture and everything.
Yeah.
Like this is completely against the First Amendment of free speech. Like if you're not allowing someone to express their opinions, it's not about like if the truth and the truth and the lies anymore. It's more about like how can you say this about these things? You don't know about this. You don't know about this. Like fighting people for over like this thing happened about Israel and Palestine and lot of stuff when it comes to these topics of gender identities and lot of things. Like rather than sitting together and having a proper discussion, intellectual level discussion and thinking about things rationally, people just become like, and these are the people from both the sides, both extremes.
It's everybody. It's a human flaw that people become emotionally invested in their position. That's when you're in trouble. Yeah. When you hold an opinion because it makes you feel good, that's when you're probably on the wrong path. You've got to go to the intellectual side and prove it out, and the storytelling has to go away. So that's kind of how I think about it. When I was in college, one of my best friends was my roommate's girlfriend. She was communist. She was being taught communism at the University of Michigan. And thought that was the better way of doing things. That it's the Karl Marx thing. Well, we'll control all power has to be centralized so that we can essentially kill everybody that won't participate in this new way of doing things. And after everybody goes along with it, we don't need to keep the power anymore, and so we can go away and release, and everybody will just self-manage themselves from there on out. And she would tell me the story, and I go like, tell me one person who gave up power once they had it. Exactly. It's like it's in human nature once you have it. And we see that in real time here, because how many senators and Congress people do we have that are 60, 70, and 80 years old? We got too many of them. Yeah. My generation, 60, 70, 80, should go away.
Like a lot of old people who are in the politics.
Yeah, once they get in, they will not leave, and people should bow out and says, okay, I was a congressman for 15 years or 16 years, whatever. It's time for me to pass the baton to somebody else, young person, and then I should go on and do something else to aid society in some place, in some way. That's a thing that's very disappointing to me. And these are both parties that people stick around too long. One of the things that I do like is that generally presidents usually don't opine anymore. So like you don't hear from George Bush anymore. He's gone off. I don't know what he does all day. Nobody knows what he does all day because he's out of the limelight. He's not in trying to get involved with politics. Barack is still kind of doing it. He's the first president I can remember in my lifetime that was involved with politics and trying to promote his party after they left the White House. You think guys like Jimmy Carter, when he left, he started to build houses for people and Habitat with Humanity kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter, I remember one thing which you told me about, like on the funeral when Barack and Donald Trump were like sort of laughing on something, and it was irritating. I think Kamala.
This was a conversation we had.
The video about the video.
The video about the.
There was a video when Trump and Obama were like laughing at something. And
that was at his funeral. Yeah, I thought it was funny because they show the funeral and then all the presidents and their spouses were sitting together, and Barack and Obama and Donald Trump were talking together, just laughing it up, having a great time, and stuff like that. And everybody else was mean and nasty and had a terrible look on their face and showing anger to their political opponents and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of funny. when I watched it. I think Barack Obama is probably one of the most charismatic guys we've had on a long time, and a very personable guy. I, by the way, worked with a guy in Indonesia. Went to high school with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Barack used to play a lot of basketball, and my buddy, the guy that I worked with, played football. He was on the football. They went to school in Hawaii. And so when he talked about him, I thought, oh, okay, you can tell me a lot about him. Because this is before he ran for president. He's running for president. And he said, yeah, I used to talk to him all the time. He says, we never talk politics. We always just talk sports. That's all he did and talked about. Then he went to a place called Occidental College, which is in Southern California. Interesting to see if the college is still there. That area of LA hasn't burned yet, I don't think.
Soon.
But he went to a place called Occidental College.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. We have came like so.
Are you running out of time? Running out of power?
It's almost like 1 hour 40 minutes.
Okay.
Like before ending it, I really want to talk about the Bitcoin part, which we did say. So like I really want to know about like what do you think about Bitcoin, because I think this is interesting. Like a person from your coming from your age who shouldn't believe in the new digital age currency and what is going to happen, how Bitcoin is going to replace as a fiat money and everything. But you really talk highly about Bitcoin, and you really highly talk about cryptocurrencies and digital currencies. So what's your what exactly happened? What changed your mind about this, and what do you think about Bitcoin in the future?
Well, I've read, and I encourage people that want to know about economics to go to Mises.org. It's the number one bastion of free market economics, and so they call it Austrian economics. I'm not sure what the history of that is, but I think the people that started the train of thought were probably of Austrian background, but I don't know for sure, so don't hold me on that. And the Mises was probably, in my mind, the greatest economist to ever live. He's not well recognized by the establishment because he was very anti-government, because his one of his views was that no matter what the government does, it's doing the wrong thing, because they're not responding to market forces. They're not responding to what a customer demands. So that's always problematic. And he was very famous that early on when communism was starting to become a big deal in Russia and stuff like that, and he explained why it was going to fail when everybody thought it was a great threat to humanity. And he wrote a lot of books. He taught, I think it was at UNLV. But anyway, I read a ton of stuff for about 15 years that was published by the Mises Institute. It's part of Auburn University. And so I'd read tons about monetary policy, monetary systems, and these kind of things. And I was very concerned because I was a young person when we went off the gold standard, and we took our, I was a little coin collector, and they took the silver out of our coins, and I was really upset as a little boy that when I went to the bank to get my money, they gave me I gave you a bunch of silver coins. What is this? What are these nickel copper thingies? These aren't worth squat. And go like, well, it's not how it works. You don't get back the money that you put in. So I'd read tons about that. So I was very intrigued. Now, when it first came out, I read the white paper. No, I shouldn't say that. Years after it came out and it started to become a thing, I read the white paper, and I thought the white paper was a difficult read. So I couldn't really properly understand what was going on. And I didn't understand the nature of having something truly decentralized. How do you create something that nobody can control? I mean, it's a very bizarre concept. And it took me a long time to understand that really what it is, it's a protocol. it's like a computer program, and that program is going to do whatever you instruct it to do. Within its rules, do what it's going to instruct it to do. And other people, what was nice is you can't shut it down. That was the one thing that was very difficult. What do you mean you can't shut it down? And it just took me a long time to understand that if anybody could fire up a node, process a transaction, and it would go through. But it was one of those things. It just took a lot of research and reading about what other people were saying and listening to podcasts. And then just sort of a light went on, and I realized you can't shut it off. It can't be shut off. Yeah. That was like the biggest thing. The government will never allow this. They're going to shut it off. And I kept thinking there was be a way for them to do it, and there's really not way to shut it off. So it's this alternative monetary system, and what makes it so much different, to my mind, than everything else is the monetary network. When we were on the gold standard, was our front pocket. That's where we kept our gold coins in a little leather pouch. And we went into the saloon and we bought ourselves a shot of whiskey or whatever, a cow, whatever, whatever we're doing. So you paid, you carried your money around in your pocket. People were the network, and that's how we trade with everything, and which is, not very safe, because somebody could rob you. And it's like when, Wells Fargo used to deliver gold and stuff, they put it on the stagecoaches, and then they'd have to have guys with guns. That's what the whole idea of the guy sitting in the passenger seat being shotgun, because that guy was sitting there with a shotgun because he's hauling the,
gold.
Hauling the gold in the thing. And so security is a huge issue. So it could get stolen. You could put it on deposit with a bank. And most bank problems in the 1800s, where people would deposit money at goldsmiths who would hold it, they would issue them a receipt. They figured out, the goldsmiths figured out that a lot of times people would not come back and get their gold. They would just take that certificate and then use it as money. And so nobody would come in and cash in the certificate. So they go like, well, I could lend some money. People would come in, they want to borrow some money, I'll lend them, and I'll give them a certificate and I'll lend them money. So now they've got more certificates outstanding than there's gold. And the whole idea was that, well, maybe some people might come get it, and we could do that. But all these panics and stuff had to do with the fact that rumors would start that gold's not there. Everybody would run with their certificate, want to cash in, and it would cause a banking crisis, collapse, and economic calamities and stuff like that. So what's very interesting to me is the network is built into the system. So the coins itself are part of the network, and the network's part of the coins. They're a symbiotic relationship. So that's why you can take something, and if I wanted to send a gold bar over to England, I would have to hire a bonded delivery person to go send it over there, and so somehow get over there. Or I could just wire them a Bitcoin, and it'd be there, and he would know he had it within 10 minutes. He would be able to spend it probably within 2 or 3 hours. And that's a much better system than worrying about that. Now, it's very secure. It's only unsecure if somebody breaks into your wallet, which is like somebody breaking into your bank account.
Or maybe a locker. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like
or if it was physical gold, somebody breaks into your locker, steals your stuff, and things like that. So it just said, to me, it's like, okay, I got a currency that they can't print. So it's not going to be inflationary. You're not going to get inflation, which is the worst thing about fiat currency systems, is people get up, go to work, and they got enough money to buy a car, and they wait 6 months, and they find out, well, they can only get 3/4 of a car for that amount of money, and that's not right, because you've committed energy, expertise, all this stuff in order to get something. That money is supposed to be there to take that effort that you got. You turn that effort and energy into something that you should be able to expend 1 year from now, 5 years, 10 years from now, and reflect the value that you added to the system. And inflation, takes that away from you. And so to me, it's very important not to have a non-inflationary currency. The idea of a 2% inflation rate comes from the Bank of New Zealand, I think, the central bank. And that to me is like, it was, where did that come from? Well, it was a made up number.
Oh, okay. Really?
There's no proven economic theory with data and everything else that says, we will maximize GDP output and employment and everything else if our inflation rate is 2%. There is not.
I didn't know that. Like, I thought this kind of a number which is on research based.
It just came out of somebody's keister. That's it. It's just a made up number. It's sort of like the Phillips curve. They constantly talk about there's a relationship between inflation and unemployment. The data shows the correlation's zero. And they still cling to that. Idea.
Recently, whenever there's a Fed meeting or something, people.
Yeah, it might have a little transient effect for a few months, but if you go to Fred.org, I think it's part of the Federal Reserve. Go get the inflation data, go get the unemployment data, and then do a scatter chart, and then ask it to calculate a regression curve. It's a flat line. There's no relationship. So that's kind of a silly thing. But so I really like this idea of having an asset that can't be inflated away, and that being very important, and something that is easy to transact and low cost to transact. Now, if you wanted to send money back home to India, you would go to your bank and they were going to do a bank wire. They would probably charge you $35. And the receiving bank over in India, they might charge $35 or $50 or $100. And that's how much it would cost for you to get money over there. If you're exchanging the currency, you're going from dollars to rupees, well, they'd probably take another 5% for that. And so, you're walking around without a lung because the transaction cost is just has hammered you. So if you can do that, now you can do that same thing and it costs you a couple of pennies.
Yeah, we do transact in crypto. Like if he wants to pay me money or I want to pay him money, we do use crypto.
It's very inexpensive. So I think it has all these advantages. And so it's very much like cash because somebody else can't stop you from spending the money. So we just saw this event up in Canada where the truckers were protesting, and the Canadian government under Trudeau, here's a good conspiracy theory for you. People think that Trudeau is Castro's son, Fidel Castro's son. Don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I think I've heard about this.
So in any event, so he basically said you're not allowed to do that, and he turned off everybody's bank. He ordered the banks to turn off everybody's bank account. So everybody who was there, couldn't buy gas, couldn't buy food, whatever else. That was the way he was going to stop the protests. And one of the greatest bastions of democracy there is, right? So that's sarcasm. So then people said, okay, do that. And people, when they couldn't get money, they did a GoFundMe. And the government confiscated the GoFundMe and took the money. And then even the lawyers kind of stepped up and said, you've gone too far here. You just can't take people's money. So he says, okay, we're going to give it to a better cause. We're going to give it to charity. And the lawyers go like, come on, you can't do that. That's stealing money. Can't do that. Not even, it's like, they were letting him get away with shutting off people's bank accounts. And the government lawyers said, you can't do that. So he just said, okay, well, we'll give the money back. But we'll only give the money back if people send us a request to have their money back. So they were hoping people wouldn't send a request and they would keep the money. So I don't know really what happened. Then later after that, then people started using crypto to send people some money, so that because it's the dead of winter, and the truck drivers are living in their trucks, and so they need diesel to run their trucks to stay warm, buy food, stuff like that. So it's censorship resistant because I can send it. Any person can send crypto to another. Somebody, you're not asking anybody's permission. You're not asking, because in a fiat system, somebody else processes everything, except for you when you actually go into the grocery store and you pay cash for whatever it is you're buying. But if you're doing anything electronically, somebody is processing that for you. It's Chase Bank, might be more than one bank. If it's a credit card company, there could be 4 or 5 different entities involved with moving money from your account to the vendor's account. So it just has all these little features that seem to me would make our system a lot more efficient.
I think for bigger transaction, we could trust on crypto because the least amount of gas fee you pay right now, I'm not sure, but like among Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Solana is the least amount of gas fee where you pay. It's I think $7 or something.
Oh, okay.
And for Ethereum and Bitcoin, it's very high. And the reason being is like the consensus mechanism with Solana used is the proof of stake, which is like the most efficient system compared to the for Ethereum is proof of history.
Stake also.
Proof of history, I think.
Proof of work.
Huh?
No.
Proof of work. POW and POS.
POS is for Solana, but proof of history is for Ethereum. That's why it has higher gas fee compared to
Proof of
Solana.
work, not history.
Really? Okay.
No, it used to be. Ethereum used to be proof of work, and they changed it to proof of stake. They went through a very long, arduous thing because of the cost. And their network, they kind of hit the boundary of the volume of transactions they could put through the network, and they said we need to do something else, so they switched to proof of stake. Now I don't like proof of stake.
Okay, why?
Because to me proof of stake is fiat, proof of work is gold. And let me explain why. So for the idea with gold is if you want more gold, you got to go dig it up out of the ground, you got to process, you got to do a bunch of work, and then you get something of value. That energy that you put in is represented in that bar of gold. The bar of gold is your proof of work.
Yeah.
Right? That's what gold is. Gold is proof of work.
Yeah.
And so the same thing works with Bitcoin. Now fiat is basically he who has the most money wins. So if you could easily take over the Ethereum network by just simply printing a bunch of dollars, buying a bunch of ETH. Once you had most of the money staked, you now get to control the transactions because you're going to win. You're going to win the right to process transactions more than anybody else. And if you're really good and you spread it out properly, the system probably wouldn't know that one person is controlling 50 different staking pools, dominating those staking pools, and then that same entity can control all those pools and now start pushing through fraudulent transactions.
So what's the best consensus mechanism which...
I like the best mechanism is proof of work.
Proof of work, okay.
Yeah, because it is, you have to go buy all those machines, then you've got to get energy contracts from a bunch of power companies. So at the end of the day, you're going to end up spending billions on machines, billions on electricity, and to fight for a certain amount of time. And you have to have more than that's out there already, right? Because you got to have more. You got to take whatever the capacity is out there now and double it, or more than double it. Now you get to control the network. You're going to have a 51% attack. You can control the network. That amount of money is so ridiculously huge that you could never possibly recover it if you tried to monkey with the system and shove through fraudulent.
But is it cost effective, proof of work?
Well, now this is one of the things that I think is a point I'm probably a lone person on. There's two things that people don't that argue. One is that in the current state of the world, it encourages people to start like doing more renewable energy. So, for example, in West Texas, they got a shitload of wind farms. But it's very expensive to move that electricity to like Dallas and Houston and stuff like that. So the way they make it economical is they put up the wind farm and then they put up crypto miners next to it. So they buy all the electricity until there's a power demand spike needed in those other places that they'll pay the higher price. Then those guys turn off their machines, and then the power goes to Dallas and Houston and the other big cities. So it's a way of helping to balance the grid. And that's what a lot of people talk about, and that's sort of okay. But my thing is, what I think is going to happen in the super long term is that people will do what I do. They heat their house with Bitcoin mining. So I don't run a furnace in my home. I just have Bitcoin miners running, and they keep.
How does that work?
And I just have them sitting in a room. I got in my office. I got 3. I've got another one in my main living room, and so you just need to have a little. There's a company called Heatbit. They make a unit. I've got a couple of theirs, so I just turn it on and say make the room 74 degrees. And it runs Bitcoin. If it gets warm, it shuts itself off. And then if it gets cold, it turns itself on. And I earn a little Bitcoin for my effort. Now, there's no reason why we can't heat swimming pools with Bitcoin miners. There's no reason we can't run dryers, our clothes dryers, for example. There's lots of things that we do that we just cook off some heat, off it goes, never to be used again. And I think that's what's going to happen like 20 years from now or whatever, a long time from now.
I have heard it for the first time, like we can use this. So like if the heat is producing in your room, one room where the Bitcoin mining is happening, how do you transfer that heat to another, like all the places?
Well, every room's got its own little miner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. The way my place is laid out is a flat, so if I put my miners in the main room, the heat just naturally goes to all the rooms, so it's not. So I don't necessarily need that. But if you had a typical 2-story house and whatever, yeah, I'd put a different machine in each room. They're not very big.
Right.
I just saw one that was just made. It looks like a baseboard heater, just like that's in people that use water heat to heat their house, baseboard hot water. Looks just like that. Put it on the ground, and it will do its thing. And they're just made. They're not made to be the most efficient. That's the problem with a basic Bitcoin miner, like an S19 or whatever. Is to cool them, they take the chips, they're like just sandwiched on top of each other. So to cool them, they got to push air over them, and each one of the chips have a little heat sink on them, and you push the air really hard. But to get the air to go through there, you need these fans. And the fans have to blow so hard, they sound like jet engines. So those are not practical for your home, but you don't need something like that is like you're trying to... because it's a cost of doing business. So the way I think of it is I get free Bitcoin, except for the fact that I had to buy some machines to
How
to
much
do
that
that
machine costs?
I have some that cost $300-400. I just bought one from a company in Singapore, 4 terahashes, uses 125 watts, cost $140. And then, but delivery to get it here to the U.S. cost me like another $50.
Oh, okay.
So all these other things. So I bought it just for the fun of trying it.
Is it worth it? Like getting I don't know what amount.
Yeah,
of
and it actually works by Wi-Fi. So I took that and I stuck it in another room, and it's a little box like this big, and it puts out enough heat that takes care of the room.
Oh.
But if you want more, like I have one, these things from Heatbit, I don't remember what their wattage is, but I want to say it's like 500, 600, 700 watts.
Oh.
So it's enough, and they just run slow. and you're just getting a little heat all the time, and they typically not coming on, going off, going on, going off. You know, they speed up or they slow down. And so I have these things. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but that's okay. And I have a bunch that I use here in the school in my office. My office is terribly cold. There was one year that we had a super cold snap, 3 years or something. I think got down to 42 degrees in my office.
And that's because you need to keep it cold because of all the miners.
No, that was just the way the building was.
Oh, okay.
So then I said, I'm going to bring in some Bitcoin miners, and so I got Bitcoin miners and put in my office. And so I make some Bitcoin, give them to the school with these things. And I have the little lab that the students work, where we have about 70 terahashes of Bitcoin mining going on. And we also do some Litecoin and Doge. Doge right now is our most, excuse me, our most profitable coin right now.
Oh.
I make about, I don't know, $5 a day in Doge.
And how much you're spending, like?
And no, I just keep it off, because what I want is I want to take it. We're collecting it all, and then at some point when we sort of have a critical mass, we're going to set up a club where the students can trade it. Of course, it's school property, and they'll do all the thing, and we'll have to do whatever processes the school wants us to do.
Right.
But they will. But we'll do that, and that's sort of the goal of. Collecting the money, because we are a business school, and markets are an important thing, and trading and stuff like that. And I would, if kids find a meme coin or something crazy, to make some money for the school and make an endowment or something like that, it'd all be fun and games. So I think that's the way the world will probably look at some point. We're going like, why are we setting up these huge industrial farms? Now, it's perfectly fine for areas where there's stranded power. So things like Iceland. Maybe this is why Trump wants Iceland. You put all the Bitcoin miners over there because it's a volcano. So they use energy from the ground, the heat from the ground, to boil water and drive turbines. And and so it's not just that. The industry in aluminum moved a bunch of smelters there because power is so cheap. So they'll collect aluminum, bauxite, and all the other things they need for making aluminum, bring it over there. They refine it into, cheap metal and all the other stuff because the price of energy goes. Now, the one thing that is you should be aware of is people don't go open up an industrial miner in Manhattan. They go and set these things up basically, for the most part, where there's stranded power. And what stranded power means is they're generating power, but they got no use for the power. There's nothing to do. So it just goes to ground. Most people don't realize it, but in the US and in Europe and everywhere else, about a third of the power that gets generated never gets used. And it's because of the nature of the grids and keeping them balanced. If the difference between the amount of power delivered to the grid and demanded from the grid are different for more than like a second or two, the grid crashes. So what you have to have is you've got to have backup power running all the time on the grid. So if somebody fires up some big switch, or like 1,000 houses turns power on at the same time, the grid can respond really fast, deliver more power to the grid within a second or two or three, whatever it takes, and rebalance the grid. So they have the grid has, and this is sort of the downside of wind energy and solar power, especially wind. I financed about 8 or 9 wind farms when I worked at ANZ. We had a nice renewable energies financing business. But they need something called spinning reserves. What a spinning reserve is it's a power plant that's running, and the generator's going, but the generator's not delivering power to the grid. Because if in some second the wind stopped at the wind farm, then you need like another 100 megawatts to automatically just come on grid right away, because if it didn't, the grid would crash.
Yeah.
So you've got the power, just look at all these nice windmills. These windmills are generating power for nothing, and there's no electrical or energy consumed in that. They're just generating power. But then there's this thing going on in the background that nobody knows is running, that's burning natural gas to do that. And there's a lot of complications in that. And so to the extent that you could have a power demand that can be turned off as opposed to a new one to be turned on, it does the same thing for the grid.
Right.
So if there's a big demand for the grid, the crypto miners shut down, or they go run at a slower rate, stop using less power, the grid stays in balance. So there are other things going on that make it not as bad as one might say. But it is the energy that you need that secures the network.
Yeah. But
That's
this seems like very interesting to me. Like, I'm gonna buy a miner soon.
So I think it's fun. It's look, I'm an engineer. I like to play with these things, and when I was a kid, I had erector sets and all that kind of stuff, and chemistry sets. Poor kids today, you guys can't have a chemistry set.
Yeah.
When I was 6 years old or 8 years old, I was making gunpowder, and I could make my own firecrackers and stuff like that. You could buy. You could buy the components for that, which are saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, and you can make your own gunpowder. And
I think we also had this.
You buy kits to do that. When I was a little kid, you could buy a gun from the Sears Roebuck catalog and have it delivered to your house.
The real gun? Or
Yeah, a real gun. Yeah, 22.
Oh, okay.
BB guns, all that kind of stuff. You guys are in a much more protected
Yeah, I know.
environment. We did not wear helmets when we rode bikes.
In India, we still don't wear helmets.
So in the U.S., my whole life, it wasn't until I started to ride bikes as exercise, road bikes and stuff, and off-roading. I like to ride off-road bikes.
Do you have a collection of bikes?
Yeah, big knobby tires and stuff like that, because I don't like to be on the road, because cars don't respect you. And I used to ride from Princeton out to New Hope all the time, and I would get brushed by cars all the time.
Oh.
It's like they wouldn't move over. It's like, get out of my way, sucker! And they didn't care if they pushed me or whatever else, stuff like that. So,
Do you have a bike?
Oh yeah, I have a mountain bike. Yeah,
Oh.
and I really like doing it. And it's okay. You do stuff and you fall off and you land on the dirt or grass or whatever you're running over. I love that stuff of jumping over logs and things like that. So it's like trials riding on a motorbike. I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot, and I'd like to do a lot more. I haven't done that much lately, but there's a park outside of Princeton where I used to live that'd take about 2-3 hours to go around this lake, and I'd take my dog, who was a Labrador Retriever. So I would ride and he would run, and we had a really nice time just getting away. You're out of nature. You're away from the noise. It was I enjoy that a lot.
That's right. I think it's almost 2 hours. Like, I had something for finance questions, but I think we have covered a lot of it.
Okay.
On the Bitcoin side.
Are you out of power?
Not with this, but maybe with this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like I think they can record just for around like 2 hours or something. It depends on the size.
Okay.
So
that's
like,
fine.
Both of them are 50 GB each. So I think it will.
Oh, you're going to run out of memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
power. So I think it's almost 47 or 48 GB if it's
Okay.
2 hours.
Okay,
So
that's fine. Well,
Yeah,
that was a
but
good talk. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, same here. Like, I loved it. Like the conspiracy theories and all the things. Like that was really interesting. I learned a lot from this. It was really interesting, actually. I had a lot of things to ask about, like communism, capitalism, but like we can talk for hours if we just talk about it.
That's true. I'd like to talk about that, especially because communism is becoming popular with people of your age, much more than I've ever seen before. Like at Michigan, like I said, they did a lot of teaching of that.
Oh, okay.
It was a common thing, and in the liberal arts college of teaching communism.
Yeah.
And I just have always rejected it because you cannot make me better off by stealing my money. It's just some real core concepts that I had at the time. Not about other things about why communism doesn't work, but you can't make my life better by taking my money.
Right.
And I'm not. And one of the greatest con jobs of all is people thinking they're going to get something free out of the system.
Yeah. But definitely, I really want to talk about capitalism and communism with you. And like, I want to talk about the money part, but I think it already went till about 2 hours. So
we'll come and talk about all
again,
those
like,
kind
I
of
really
things.
want to do it again and talk about money specifically and capitalism and communism. So that's why.
Okay.
This came to my mind like when we were talking, but I was like, okay, let's cover the Bitcoin topic first because it's gonna be a long topic. Talk about capitalism.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, it is a good one.
Thank you so much for your time.
It was
a really nice
my
conversation.
pleasure. I enjoyed doing a lot of these. Expressing your ideas is always hard, and to say them in a way that is well received and people understand. And hopefully I'm getting better at it over time.
This is actually, you know what, this is the first time I'm doing a podcast without giving them any questions in advance and like topics in advance.
Yeah, I don't like it in advance because it makes it too mechanical, and then I start to pre-rehearse and stuff. And I think the better approach is to just have what's naturally going to come out, because that's what you want to say anyway. And then if you do it in advance, you might start second guessing what you want to say, and am I going to say something and hurt somebody's feelings or like get somebody upset? And I'm just like, just have the conversation. If you get upset, I'm sorry.
And that is what the true meaning of a podcast, I would say. It's not an interview, it's a podcast. Usually, so.
Well, this is why Joe Rogan is so good, is he is a consummate conversationist. So his ability to just have a conversation and probe and ask questions is just terrific. I just think he's really good at that. And
he's a well-read guy. I would say he's a well-read guy. Like, he knows a lot about stuff, so that whenever someone is talking about something, he knows something about that, so that he can give out an opinion on that, and that makes it a more like a conversation. So
and he's a very interesting guy, stand-up comedian. He's a mixed martial artist, fighter, MMA. So it's just a very interesting guy. He also hosted a show on TV. I forget what it was, but it was one of these things where, Fear Factor. Fear Factor. Yeah, that was. I remember watching that show back in the day, and that was just. I'd give you the EBGBs all the time because people have to stick their hand in a box and all kinds of insects or something on there, and person's going to freak out because they think they're going to get bit.
We have the
or something.
exact same show in India. It's called Khatro Ke Khiladi. It's the exact same. Like, it's a copy of Fear Factor.
Yeah,
it's very famous in India too.
Yeah, so it's a funny one that is, and those kind of shows are great for the producer because they don't cost any money to make. So it's like these, this unscripted TV, or they like to call reality TV. That's not the proper way to say it. It's not reality, for one. So it's not reality TV because these things they're doing are not. It's unscripted.
Yeah,
it's just unscripted TV. They follow people around and see what kind of dumbass shit they do.
It's unscripted, but like properly planned. All the creative people.
It's all planned and what they're going to do, and the cameras are there, and people are going to do. But what people are going to say, or whatever fights they're going to get into, or what they're going to have for dinner, or what drinks they're going to have, or whatever, they're all making that up right on time at the time, and stuff like that, or they go shopping.
All right, I'll finish it like officially here for now.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome.